Good morning and welcome. I invite you to stand if you are able. With deep gratitude to the Quinnipiac people for this land on which we stand, my beloved Yale family, I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer. Almighty and brilliant Creator, fount of all life, here we stand in the splendor of this morning, many and diverse expressions of one living mystery which is beyond all telling. We are gathered from all parts of your world to serve a sacred purpose. We are the children of yesterday's yearnings and the embodiment of tomorrow's promise. On this day, the continuing creation of our lives awaits us with ever-increasing horizons of meaning and responsibility. It is our unknown next. Loving God, here in this place of such privilege and learning, bless our hearts, our minds, and our hands as we begin. May we be tireless seekers of your truth and ever gentle carriers of your light. Let curiosity fuel us and compassion guide us as this new creation unfolds. Awaken us to your genius in the midst of ancient conversations, contemporary texts, fossils, and formulas. Instill in us a lifelong thirst to know more and in turn to share more. Finally, may our loved ones take pleasure in the changes they will see in us, and may they be patient with the twists and turns that will no doubt be between wish and fulfillment in this unknown next. For all that is spoken aloud in this poignant life moment, and for that which rests silently in our hearts, as your loving people we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Thank you, Chaplain Kugler. President Salovey, colleagues, students, families, and friends, good morning. Students from the class of 2026, transfer students and Eli Whitney students and visiting international students, welcome to Yale. And family members and friends, in my role as Dean of Yale College, I extend my warm welcome to you as well, along with gratitude for everything you've done in supporting and guiding these young adults. The opening assembly is one of my favorite formal events of the academic year because it introduces us to each other, just as you, our new students, have begun introducing yourselves to your classmates. And I also think of it less formally as the beginning of a conversation with your peers and instructors that will go on for many years to come. You will find great fellowship here, and also you will find the great pleasure of learning. At the beginning of his Analects, the Chinese philosopher Confucius provides words that are as relevant today as they were 2,500 years ago. Here he is, as though addressing you now. Is it not a pleasure to learn, and, when it is timely, to practice what you have learned? Is it not a joy to have friends come from afar? And I'm delighted to welcome you, our new students, who come from near or far to experience the pleasure of learning together. Yale professor An Ping Chin emphasizes that the purpose of learning for Confucius consisted in the opportunity to develop our moral and aesthetic sensibilities, to fulfill our humanity, and to do so with humility. In a parallel with Socrates, who lived about a century later, we know most of what Confucius taught through conversations that he had and accounts of his disciples. In fact, his book, The Analects, is known in Chinese as Lun Yu, which means conversations or dialogues. And like these ancient thinkers, the community that you are now joining is one that learns through dialogue. Thoughtful conversation can allow each of us to develop our own sensibilities and to fulfill our humanity. The Yale College community has a long history shaped by the many generations of students who have come before you, and this week, more than 1,500 of you have come to New Haven from all over the world. No single racial or ethnic group makes up a majority in this very diverse student body. Almost a fifth of you will be in the first generation in your families to graduate from a four-year college. Approximately a fifth of you have received Pell Grants for lower-income students. 128 applied through the Questbridge program. 47 were admitted through the Transfer and Eli Whitney Students Program. 13 of you are U.S. military veterans, and 21 of you began your college education at a community college. Hear, hear. And together you represent 51 states and territories of the United States and more than 50 countries. Amidst this great diversity, you also share much in common. You are promising students with wide horizons and an excitement about learning. Now, when you hear me talk about horizons, I should say that when I wrote the speech, I was expecting good weather. So I'm hoping that the horizon will hold for at least a little bit longer. Together, you've come to Yale to pursue a broad liberal education, and you will find one here in both formal and informal settings. Here we stand in front of Sterling Memorial Library, the heart of campus, which holds over 2 million books in all fields of knowledge. And I will say to you all undergraduates that while underneath you is the cross-campus library, which is a great place to study, do go up into the stacks of Sterling, even if you're not going to take out any books, just to get a sense of the range of knowledge that is out there and that you might someday explore, recognizing that in your whole lifetime you won't make it through all 2 million books. But you'll learn in the classrooms and the discussion sections that start next week. You'll learn in the libraries and the galleries and the laboratories where you will broaden and test what you've learned, and in the desk or the carrel that you may reserve for solitary study. And you'll experience the less formal part of your education when you talk with people around you in the student groups that you join, with your instructors during their office hours, or with the stranger or new friend sitting beside you at the long table in your residential college dining hall. Yale's traditions and communities form their own civil society that exists in parallel with the formal curriculum taught by the professors. Of course, you're here to pursue the formal study, but I also encourage you to explore various ways to learn outside the classroom or the library. This is a campus designed often intentionally and sometimes just by happy accident for conversation. Together, the books and the classrooms and the more informal lessons that you'll learn from each other, all of these form part of a single, broader conversation, the conversation of a scholarly community that defines the pursuit of knowledge in a great university. Now, you come here knowing the state of public discourse in our polarized society. You know already that at times it simply reaffirms our existing beliefs. At other times it devolves into partisanship or even violence. Universities are not immune to dogma, but they do aspire to a higher type of conversation. As you join or start your own conversations in the semesters ahead, think about how you can expand your horizons. One of the distinctive things about human experience is that each of us is born in a particular body at a particular time and place, and therefore we see the world from a given perspective. But we also have the chance to expand our worldview as we grow and learn and travel. The poet Tennyson has a beautiful image of this kind of learning in his poem Ulysses. He writes, "I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move." There's always something to learn just over the horizon. Whether you've traveled a long way to get here, or whether you've lived all your life in New Haven, you may feel that sense of an expanding horizon as you meet new friends and explore new intellectual territory. I've spent almost half my life at Yale, so I see the world from a very particular vantage point, but I've also spent a lot of time thinking about how education allows us to transcend the limits of our horizons. In his book, Truth and Method, an important book about historical interpretation, the German philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer wrote that the horizon is the range of vision that includes everything that can be seen from a particular vantage point. And he argued that understanding involves what he called a fusion of horizons in which we become more thoughtful about how our own assumptions and the way we see things correspond to and relate to someone else's vantage point. For Gadamer, interpreting an ancient text or having a conversation or dialogue with another person involves opening ourselves up to reassessing our own assumptions. Now, he focuses on interpersonal and humanistic knowledge, but a similar process is at work in testing scientific hypotheses. In fact, the work of understanding and even just the work of living in this world involves a constant mental journey through time and space that develops our views and changes our horizons, a journey like the one that Ulysses made, what the Greeks call an odyssey. It involves an ongoing metaphorical conversation where we question our own assumptions and prejudices through our encounters with other people. Ideally, if we're open to growing, we can talk to people whose standpoints differ from our own, and we can learn from those conversations. A crucial, in fact, even a defining prerequisite of learning, especially at the university level, is the willingness to open ourselves to views and ideas and even ways of life that challenge our assumptions, either so that we can learn to defend our assumptions and understand them, or in some cases to change and to reassess those assumptions. This doesn't mean that you need to accept every idea that your professors or fellow students propose to you, but in the years ahead, your job will be to consider the new ideas you encounter with an open mind, to weigh new perspectives and arguments, and to arrive at your own views about matters of great importance for yourselves and for your futures. Matters such as the nature of justice, the understanding of the natural world, the meaning of art, the purposes of life. You will explore these questions not only in your classes, but also over meals in your dining halls, on the athletic fields, in your campus jobs, in your student organizations, as volunteers serving the community, or in any of the many pursuits open to you as a student. One of the greatest opportunities to learn at Yale comes from the peer effect. That's the chance to interact with talented people your own age. The Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Adichie, who also happens to have received her master's degree at Yale, offers a similar vision to Gadamer's when she discusses learning about other people's experiences, especially in the context of living in a college community. So Gadamer focuses on understanding different horizons through time and history. Adichie emphasizes listening to different stories through space and geography. In her speech on the danger of a single story, she tells of arriving at the age of 19 at another fine American university, I won't mention the name of the other university, where her roommate knew nothing about Nigeria and made certain stereotypical assumptions about Adichie's homeland and way of life. So at first, Adichie was annoyed at her roommate's lack of understanding, but after spending some time in the United States and thinking about her own limited knowledge of rural parts of Nigeria that she had never visited, Adichie came to realize that her roommate's assumptions were due to her limited exposure to more accurate stories about Africa. Adichie goes on to tell both positive and negative stories of her childhood, and then she says, "All of these stories make me who I am, but to insist only on these negative stories is to flatten my experience and to overlook the many other stories that formed me. The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." Adichie concludes that it is impossible to engage properly with a place or a person without engaging with all of the stories of that place and that person. It is all too easy to make assumptions about others that we meet, or to take offense at assumptions that others make about us. But our goal is to engage in dialogue so that we can overcome initial misunderstandings and learn from one another. As you settle into your residential colleges and begin your classes, I invite you to participate in a dialogue. Like Confucius, enjoy the pleasure of learning. Like Ulysses, seek out new worlds. Like Gadamer, strive to expand your horizon of expectations. Like Adichie, explore the complexity of other people's stories, share your own stories, and create new stories together. You may find the most interesting conversations in seminars or lab meetings, or you may find them in your extracurricular activities or late at night in the college buttery. You will find those conversations where you seek them. In order for them to succeed, I ask you to open yourselves to learning from each other. Enter into conversation in a spirit of generosity. assume good intentions, value complexity and nuance over self-assurance and stereotype. These conversations are an integral part of your Yale education. The lessons they teach you will show you how to develop as human beings, and they will show you how to shape the conversations that shape our society. Thank you, and welcome to Yale.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dean Lewis, for those inspiring remarks. It is truly a thrill to welcome all of you, our entering students and your family members, to our campus for our Yale College Opening Assembly. Today is the official start of your undergraduate education at Yale. And on behalf of all my colleagues here on the stage with me, we're delighted this day has arrived. As you know, Yale's motto is light and truth. Lux et veritas, in Latin, urim vetumim in Hebrew. And you will see it etched ubiquitously on crests around campus. Today, I want to speak with you about the part of our motto we share with many other universities around the world through their mission, ethos, culture, and that is veritas, or truth. For several years now, even as the world struggled to contain a public health crisis, we have witnessed the virulent spread of deceptive information, even outright lies. We've seen an assault on expertise, an assault on scientific and other scholarly findings, indeed, an assault on truth. Hardly a day passes without a report on someone who has discovered in the comfort of his or her own home that the scientific experts are wrong about COVID. Hardly a day goes by when someone on the internet does not spin some new fact-free conspiracy theory. Historical events we know to be true are denied by individuals with nefarious motives. Here are 5 brief examples. Earlier this year, some in our country, including those in positions of leadership, depicted a violent mob's attempt to disrupt the most basic functioning of our democracy by denying an election outcome as legitimate political discourse. As destructive wildfires, severe drought in some places, historic flooding in others portend a catastrophic climate emergency, we see those faithful to unfounded skepticism disregard overwhelming scientific consensus. In some counties in the United States, half of the residents still do not believe global climate change is real. In recent months, Vladimir Putin has propagated misinformation about rooting out Nazis as the motivation for his unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Social media platforms have been mobilized to incite or stoke ethnic violence by propagating falsehoods in countries like Myanmar and Ethiopia. And finally, a recent defamation trial focused on a notorious conspiracy theorist who claims that the murder of 20 school children and 6 adults in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, about a half-hour's drive from here, was staged by the U.S. government. Of course, spreading misinformation is not new. History teems with the haunting consequences of lies. Philosopher Hannah Arendt, on whom Yale bestowed an honorary degree in 1971, writes of some of humanity's darkest chapters and the malignant regimes that authored them. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule, she says, is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist. It is, rather, people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, that is, the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, that is, the standards of thought, no longer exist. Yes, malevolence can feast on the environment devoid of veritas, and at stake, therefore, in the abiding search for truth is humanity itself. For our part, colleges and universities must combat the spread of misinformation, propaganda, and conjured conspiracy theories. First, by supporting faculty. They generate scientific data and scholarly insight. Faculty must be free to disseminate knowledge and teach you to think critically about ideas and their sources. But to do so effectively, our institutions of higher education, faculty and students, must be open to engaging with diverse ideas, whether conventional or unconventional, of the left or of the right. It is Yale's obligation to address the credibility crisis, for we have long stood for the pursuit of truth and devoted ourselves to it. Colleges and universities like Yale are home to artists and scholars and scientists and practitioners who spend their entire lives searching for truth. Yet, the growing polarization in society around ideas, spoken of by your dean, whether embraced or eschewed by a particular faction, impedes the search for truth and threatens to erode public confidence in expertise. minimizing the impact of universities, precisely when unvarnished truth is so desperately needed. Faculty and students, indeed the university itself, will be viewed as reliable sources of information if we do not appear closed off to unpopular or otherwise non-mainstream ideas from thoughtful individuals responsibly articulated. Most Americans still have a positive view of universities and consider a college education important for future success. But confidence that higher education has a salubrious impact on society is eroded by a belief that we will not engage with ideas that challenge us. So let me discuss a familiar example, that there has been a steady decline in the percentage of college students who believe the freedom to express unpopular points of view is secure. Actually, it is a myth that students do not want their campuses to be home to a broad range of perspectives. They do. Recent opinion polling by the Knight Foundation confirms that most students believe it is more important to be exposed to all types of speech than to protect people by prohibiting offensive or biased speech. What some refer to as cancel culture is not the dominant ideology of students. Here at Yale, which is home to the country's oldest collegiate debate society, students across the political spectrum can engage in spirited yet civil discussions. Yale College students have selected Hillary Clinton as a Class Day speaker and honored both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush as Yale Undergraduate Lifetime Achievement Award recipients. And the university has hosted interactions between individuals with ideological differences, such as a recent conversation between Emily Bazelon and Ross Douthat, and another one among 4 former secretaries of state, Democrats and Republicans. But let's be frank. It can be difficult to articulate unpopular views on college campuses. That Knight Foundation survey that I cited a moment ago suggests that only about half of all students feel comfortable offering dissenting opinions. So we need to build on an existing desire among students to engage every day in classrooms, in dining halls, in meeting spaces with different viewpoints, and to appreciate the importance of expressing their disagreement with one another. Indeed, in a university setting, we must be able to distinguish emphatically legitimate dissent from outright deceit. We must make room for beliefs we find objectionable as faithfully as we reject falsehoods we know to be lies. And we must therefore nurture a bias toward openness, even and especially when this ethos exposes us to points of view that test our most strongly held assumptions. Such a climate affords the search for truth and the credibility necessary to trust it. Of course, as we search for truth, we must be mindful of the power and influence of institutions like Yale. We must recognize with humility that what looks like a truth might not be one. I think, for instance, of our own history, our resistance to coeducation for so long, or our leadership at one time in eugenics. With power comes great responsibility. These disturbing realities are why some are reluctant even to use the word truth in describing our mission. Nonetheless, at Yale, I have often observed our faculty actively encouraging students to interrogate data and other ideas presented to them. And I have seen students change their minds when confronted with contrary evidence. Every one of you will have that experience as part of your Yale education. I suspect you'll have it often. You can enroll in courses that bring together pairs of professors representing different disciplines who model how looking at a problem from divergent perspectives can lead to new insights. A course on film taught by a film historian and a physicist. A course on the nature of choice taught by a philosopher and an economist. A course on transgender health taught by faculty members from American Studies and the School of Nursing. Similarly, in a recent semester, 3 experts from across the political spectrum co-taught a course on the crisis of liberalism, covering the Obama and Trump presidencies. We will continue to create opportunities like these for you to have open conversations about contentious, complex issues. Opportunities rooted in the reality that no ideological bloc can claim ownership of truth, that facts pledge no fealty to any of our preferred conclusions, and therefore that evidence must guide the beliefs we hold rather than conform to them. In considering this imperative, I'm reminded of the book The Death of Truth by Michiko Kakutani, a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, an alumna of Yale College, class of 1976, and a champion of the sense of truth we seek to promote. Kakutani's stirring appeal for reason and objectivity concludes with an especially, if not unnervingly relevant, warning for our era issued by James Madison. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Indeed, without commonly agreed upon facts, Kakutani posits, not Republican facts and not Democratic facts, not the alternative facts of today's silo world, there can be no rational debate over policies, no substantive means of evaluating candidates for political office, and no way to hold elected officials accountable to the people. Without truth, democracy is hobbled. The founders recognized this, and those seeking democracy's survival must recognize it today. That was all a quote from Kakutani. I think, too, of James Hatch, an extraordinary Yale undergraduate who spent over 2 decades with the Naval Special Warfare Command before returning to complete his college education. As he wrote, the climate at Yale is one where most students understand that there has to be a place where people can assault ideas openly and discuss them vigorously and respectfully in order to improve the state of humanity. Yale is committed to the responsibility of promoting the public's trust in academic research, expertise, and the value of higher education by ensuring that Mr. Hatch's experience is typical of every student, every day, in every classroom. Philosophy 181 reflects this responsibility. In her course, Philosophy and the Science of Human Nature, Yale's Faculty of Arts and Sciences Dean Tamar Gendler ties contemporary cognitive science, which has helped us to gain an understanding of how our minds operate, to the work of ancient philosophers. Students in her class consider anew Plato's allegory of the cave, in which people mistake shadows on the wall for reality. Dean Gendler walks her students through this allegory to challenge them to consider this question: how do you discover truth, given that the human mind is imperfect? Of course, our limitations pose no impediment to the search for truth, for they are, in fact, what can power the curiosity necessary to sustain it. By embracing our humility, we can broaden our understanding. So at Yale, we will not merely reaffirm what you already think as you arrive. We will instead provoke you to uncover all you do not know before you leave. We will fine-tune your ability to sift facts from falsehood, for the core of a liberal education is comprised of reason, logic, and critical thinking. Soon you will be the beneficiary of such an education, yet it behooves you also to be an active participant in it as students, and then, in due course, as alumni. And so today, as you begin your college career, I call on all of us to promote a truth-seeking climate at Yale, in every seminar, in every residential college, and in every late-night conversation, to echo our dean by being willing to entertain ideas with which we do not agree, by being willing to extend grace and assume positive intent, by listening carefully, by thinking deeply, and by speaking with empathy and understanding. Let us together elevate the virtues of tolerance and engagement and reject the culture of public shaming, doxing, and ostracism. And in time-tested tradition, let us strengthen the open discourse that has for centuries been a hallmark of our intellectual community at Yale, and that has produced the scholarship and scientific breakthroughs that have improved the world well beyond it. By doing so, you can develop expertise and also help to rescue its standing. You can, in an increasingly dark world, bring veritas to looks, and perhaps equally as vital, in a fragmented world, bring looks to veritas, light to truth. Welcome to Yale. Thank you.
Time passes quickly,
As we ready ourselves to step out onto new ground in this daunting yet inspiring liminal space of the unknown next, we begin a poignant turn of goodbyes and hellos that invite laughter, tears, challenge, choice, discovery, and pride. Let us go forth with deep trust in certain knowledge that in this place, each and every one of us is welcome, that in this place, we will both stumble and soar, that in this place, love surrounds us, beauty can surprise us. In this place, light and truth awaits us. On this day and every day forward, may all that is holy shine upon us and tenderly bless our every breath. May we go in shalom, in salam, in shanti. May we go in peace. Let us begin.